Her name was Sarah Jenkins. She was 34 years old, and on the night of her father's birthday celebration, her entire family raised their glasses in a toast, moments after turning her life into a joke. The crystal glass in Chloe Jenkins's hand lightly struck the side of the wine decanter, producing a sharp, cold sound in the magnificent dining room. The chandelier cast its glow over the long table, reflecting off the silver cutlery, the gold-rimmed porcelain plates, and the faces of more than 20 relatives waiting for their next piece of entertainment. Chloe tilted her head and looked at her younger sister. 34 years old and still showing up to parties alone. Your Christmas nights must be very quiet. A few bursts of laughter rose around the table. Sarah did not respond. She merely lifted her wine glass to her lips without taking a sip. Chloe wore a custom-made red dress, her hair styled to perfection, her smile radiant as though every gaze in the room belonged to her. As deputy marketing director of Jenkins Logistics, Chloe had always known how to turn the family's success into her own personal achievement. Sarah, by contrast, wore only a simple dark blue dress. No one there knew that she had just returned from a confidential financial security meeting in New York. No one knew that the report she had completed 3 days earlier could determine the future of a transportation alliance worth billions of dollars. In her family's eyes, Sarah was still nothing more than a salaried employee who sat in front of a computer fixing problems they did not understand. Chloe continued. Or perhaps running little computer errands leaves you no time to meet men. This time the laughter was louder. Arthur Jenkins sat at the head of the table, one hand resting beside his 65th birthday cake. He looked down at the tablecloth, avoiding his younger daughter's eyes. He had been doing that for years. Whenever Chloe went too far, Arthur chose silence, because silence was more comfortable than confrontation. Victoria Jenkins smiled at the guests before turning toward Sarah. Do not be so sensitive. Your sister is only joking. Today is supposed to be a happy day for your father. That was how emotional manipulation had always worked in this family. Chloe caused the pain. Victoria called it a joke. Arthur remained silent, and Sarah was expected to apologize for feeling hurt. But tonight, Sarah did not lower her head. She remembered the childhood dinners when Chloe's achievements were displayed in the middle of the living room while Sarah's awards were shoved into a drawer. She remembered the day she was accepted into a cybersecurity research program, and Victoria's only question had been whether that kind of work would help her find a respectable husband. Sarah was used to being underestimated, but she was no longer willing to accept humiliation simply to let other people feel powerful. She placed her wine glass on the table. The sound was very soft, but the entire table gradually fell silent. No one needs to worry about my love life. Chloe raised an eyebrow. Sarah looked directly at her older sister. I have been married for 2 years. No one moved. Victoria blinked repeatedly, as though she had just misheard a sentence spoken in a foreign language. Arthur lifted his head. One of the aunts dropped her spoon onto her plate. Chloe was the first to laugh. You are saying you have been secretly married for 2 years and no one in the family knew? Sarah calmly nodded. Chloe's smile stiffened. Who is your husband? Someone you hired to appear tonight? Sarah reached into the small handbag beside her chair. She took out a photograph, placed it in the center of the table, and slid it toward her father. In the photograph, Sarah stood in front of a small snow-covered chapel in Vermont. She wore an ivory wedding dress. There were no diamonds, no guests, and no reporters. The man beside her wore a gray suit, with one arm wrapped around her waist. Arthur looked at the photograph. All the color drained from his face. Victoria leaned closer. Chloe snatched the picture from the table. Her smile disappeared completely. The man in the photograph was Julian Vance, the founder of Vance Capital. He was also the man who held the power to approve or reject the $15 million investment Jenkins Logistics needed to avoid bankruptcy. Sarah looked at every face around the table. The people who had mocked her moments earlier no longer dared to make a sound. At the far end of the table, the investment proposal still lay beneath the chandelier's glow. And Sarah knew that when they opened it to page 22, her marriage would no longer be the most frightening secret in the room. The atmosphere in the dining room changed so quickly that the laughter from moments earlier seemed never to have existed. Chloe was still holding the wedding photograph, but her fingers had tightened so much that the edges of the paper had begun to curl. Her gaze moved from Julian's face in the picture to Sarah, searching for some sign that this was nothing more than an elaborate fabrication. She was accustomed to Sarah remaining silent. She was not accustomed to Sarah being in control. Victoria was the first to speak. "Why would you hide something this important from your family?" Her voice no longer sounded cheerful. It carried accusation, as though she were the one who had been betrayed. Sarah looked at her mother. 2 years ago, when I said I wanted to arrange a dinner to introduce someone important, you told me everyone was busy preparing for Chloe's promotion ceremony. Then you said, my situation could wait until another time. Victoria froze. She did not remember saying it. Or perhaps she did not want to remember. Chloe slammed the photograph onto the table. Even if you did marry Julian Vance, that has nothing to do with the company's investment proposal. Sarah did not answer immediately. Her eyes shifted toward the thick folder near Arthur. The cover displayed the logos of Jenkins Logistics and Vance Capital, the two names printed beside each other as though the agreement were nearly complete. Arthur immediately pulled the folder closer to himself. "Sarah, tonight is my birthday. We can discuss business tomorrow." He sounded more pleading than commanding. But Sarah understood what he was truly afraid of. Arthur was not afraid of a family argument. He was afraid that the truth hidden inside those pages would cause everything he had built over the past 30 years to collapse right there on the dinner table. Sarah reached toward the folder. "Show me page 22. Chloe immediately blocked her. "That is not necessary." Those 2 words caused Arthur to look at his eldest daughter. For one brief second, he saw the panic hidden behind Chloe's confident expression. Sarah did not try to seize the document. She simply remained seated. "If nothing is wrong, why are you afraid?" The room became completely silent. Arthur opened the folder. The pages turned one after another, their rustling unnervingly loud. When he stopped at page 22, his eyes slowly widened. The title on the page read, "Supply Chain Data Security Risk Assessment Report." Beneath it was the name Sarah Jenkins. Her title was listed as Chief Strategy Advisor, serving the family corporation without compensation. At the bottom of the page was her signature. Sarah looked down at it. It almost resembled her handwriting, but it was not hers. She had seen this kind of forgery many times during financial fraud investigations. The person who had forged it had copied the shape of her signature from an older document but had been unable to reproduce the rhythm of her hand. The opening stroke was too heavy. The final section was extended too far. The stopping points clearly revealed hesitation. Arthur turned toward Chloe. "Where did you get this document?" Chloe jumped to her feet. "It is an internal document. Sarah shared the information with the family before. She knew the company needed it." Sarah slowly shook her head. "This is proprietary security research I conducted for a maritime alliance. It was never transferred to Jenkins Logistics." Chloe continued, trying to keep her voice steady. "We are family. Sharing some data cannot be called copyright theft." Sarah's phone vibrated at that exact moment. Julian's name appeared on the screen. Sarah accepted the call and switched on the speaker. The man's voice came through, low and clear. "I have received the final file." Chloe's face turned pale. Julian continued. "The Vance Capital Review Team has confirmed 3 issues. The security report was used without authorization. Sarah's signature was forged, and the tax figures from the past 2 years appear to have been altered to conceal short-term debt." Arthur dropped the folder onto the table. Victoria raised a hand to cover her mouth. Chloe stepped toward the phone. "Mr. Vance, this is only an administrative error. We can resolve this privately." Julian's voice turned cold. "Forging a signature is not an administrative error. Copyright theft is not internal family cooperation either." Chloe looked at Sarah, her expression shifting from fear to hatred. "You told him everything." Sarah did not look away. Julian answered for her. "Sarah did not need to tell me. We discovered these violations before we knew she was connected to the proposal." A heavy silence descended over the room. Then Julian delivered his final statement. "Vance Capital is officially withdrawing from the $15 million investment agreement." Victoria sprang to her feet. She turned towards Sarah, not Chloe. "Are you really going to stand there and watch your husband destroy this family?" Sarah looked at the mother who had always told her not to be so sensitive whenever someone hurt her. This time her voice did not tremble. "No, Mother. The person who destroys a family is not the one who exposes the lie. It is the person who created it." 3 days after the birthday celebration, Jenkins Logistics received its first notice from the bank. The company's line of credit had been frozen. By the end of the week, 2 major transportation partners had suspended their contracts. The following week, auditors demanded access to all tax records, internal reports, and documents related to Sarah's signature. The storm did not arrive with a single explosion. It strangled the company little by little. Chloe was suspended from her position as deputy marketing director during an emergency meeting. Her office access card was deactivated. Her computer was sealed as evidence for the investigation. The people who had once crowded around to congratulate her at corporate events now lowered their eyes whenever she walked through the hallway. For the first time in her life, Chloe understood what it felt like to be treated as a burden. But the person who appeared at Sarah's office was not Chloe. It was Victoria. She arrived on a cold, rainy morning, wearing a cream-colored coat, carrying a leather handbag, and displaying an expression of sorrow that had been carefully prepared in advance. Sarah had just finished an online meeting when her secretary informed her that her mother was waiting in the lobby. Victoria did not greet her. She placed a folder on the desk. 50 employees will lose their jobs if the bank calls in the loan this month. Sarah looked through the payroll records, the list of drivers, and the contracts that had been placed on hold. She recognized many of the names. Some had worked for Jenkins Logistics for more than 20 years. One of them had driven her to school when Arthur was too busy. Victoria pulled out a chair and sat down. "I did not come here to argue. I only want you to tell Julian that this is a family matter. He can reverse his decision." Sarah closed the folder. "You still think Julian's decision is the problem?" Victoria tightened her grip on the strap of her handbag. "I think you are allowing your personal pain to destroy your father's company." The accusation left Sarah silent for several seconds. Even after Chloe had forged her signature, stolen her work, and concealed the company's debt, Victoria still found a way to make Sarah the guilty one. That kind of manipulation had existed for so long that Victoria no longer recognized when she was using it. Sarah stood, opened a cabinet, and took out a proposal. "I am not demanding that the company shut down." Victoria looked up. Sarah pushed the document toward her. "This is a corporate restructuring plan. The company will file for bankruptcy protection to prevent the bank from immediately liquidating its assets. The profitable transportation division will be separated and transferred to a cooperative owned by the employees themselves." Victoria quickly turned through the pages. She stopped at the section listing the assets that would have to be sold. Chloe's vacation home, the personal shares held by members of the executive board, 2 luxury vehicles registered in the company's name but used for private purposes, undisclosed executive bonuses. Victoria's head snapped up. "You want to take everything away from your sister?" Sarah answered coldly. "I want the people who created the crisis to pay before the people who simply came to work and earned a salary." Victoria rose abruptly. "You are taking revenge." "No." Sarah looked directly at her mother. "If I wanted revenge, I would have allowed the company to collapse. I am saving the part that still deserves to be saved." The investigation continued for months. Chloe was found to have directed the alteration of the investment proposal and used Sarah's documents without authorization. She did not go to prison, but she was ordered to pay fines, compensate Sarah for the unauthorized use of her work, and was prohibited from holding a management position in publicly funded projects for 2 years. Her luxury apartment was sold. The business card, bearing the title Deputy Marketing Director, became nothing more than a meaningless piece of paper. Jenkins Logistics no longer existed in its previous form, but more than 40 employees kept their jobs through the new cooperative. They elected their own management, made the financial records transparent, and divided profits according to each person's contribution. Arthur was the final person to sign the transfer agreement. Before signing, he asked to speak with Sarah alone. He looked far older than he had on the night of his birthday. His shoulders had fallen, his silver hair was slightly disheveled, and he no longer carried the presence of the founder who had once silenced an entire boardroom simply by entering it. "I knew Chloe sometimes took your ideas." Sarah said nothing. Arthur lowered his head. "I just did not know it had gone this far." Sarah looked at him. "You knew enough to speak up." But you chose silence. Those words hurt more than any accusation could have. Arthur signed a formal declaration confirming that Sarah had no connection to the company's debts or misconduct. Then he removed the fountain pen from his jacket pocket and placed it on the table. For the first time, he did not ask his daughter to forgive him. He simply said that he would leave the house in Boston and begin again with whatever money remained after fulfilling the company's obligations to its workers. Sarah watched her father walk out of the office. She did not feel victorious. She only felt lighter. Because some families do not fall apart when the truth appears. They simply stop pretending that the cracks were never there. 1 year later, Sarah Jenkins stood beneath the bright white lights of the Boston Convention Center, facing hundreds of cybersecurity professionals from around the world. Her name appeared on the enormous screen behind the stage. Sarah Jenkins, Financial Risk Management Expert of the Year. Applause swept through the hall like a wave. Sarah looked toward the front row. Julian was sitting there in a simple black suit, his hands folded in front of him. He did not stand to draw attention to himself. He only smiled at her with the calm expression of someone who had known for a very long time that this day would come. Sarah reached out and accepted the crystal award. Her wedding ring rested on her ring finger, shining clearly beneath the lights. She no longer wore it on a chain hidden beneath her clothes. In the past, Sarah had believed that concealing her marriage was a way to protect Julian from her family, but deep inside, she knew she had also been protecting herself from their judgment. She had been afraid Victoria would accuse her of using her husband. She had been afraid Chloe would turn her love into another competition. She had been afraid that even her happiness would be dragged onto the dining table and dissected for entertainment. Now, that fear no longer had power over her. After the ceremony, Sarah stepped down from the stage. Julian approached her and held her tightly. He told her that he was proud of her. Sarah laughed. Not because she needed his approval, but because for the first time, she could receive love without feeling indebted to the person who gave it. Life in the Jenkins family had changed as well. Arthur left the mansion in Boston and moved into a small house near the coast of Maine. He began working as an independent technical consultant for a local transportation company. There was no assistant, no private car, and no meeting where everyone waited for him to speak first. Every month, he sent Sarah a letter. He did not ask her to come back. He did not demand forgiveness. He simply wrote about his work, about mornings spent making his own coffee, and about how he was learning to say what he truly thought before his silence hurt someone else. Sarah answered some of the letters. Not all of them. That was a personal boundary she had chosen for herself. It was not meant to punish her father, but to protect the peace she had spent years trying to recover. Chloe started again as a junior marketing specialist at a small company. There was no glass office, no authority to approve budgets, and no staff following behind her to write down every word she said. During the first few months, Chloe resented everyone. She blamed Sarah. She blamed Julian. She blamed her father for signing the restructuring agreement. But when there was no one left for her to control, Chloe was forced to look at herself. 6 months later, she sent a public apology to the Transportation Cooperative and admitted that she had used Sarah's work without authorization. The letter did not erase the consequences, but it was the first time Chloe had told the truth without trying to make herself the victim. Victoria was the slowest to change. She called Sarah many times, initially to complain that her daughter had made the family the subject of public gossip. Sarah did not argue. She simply said that if her mother continued blaming her, the call would end. Victoria continued. Sarah hung up. The second call ended the same way. On the third call, Victoria remained silent for a long time before asking Sarah whether she was doing well. It was only a simple question. But for Victoria, it was the first step toward learning how to love someone without controlling them. Sarah did not return to the life she had lived before. She did not organize grand family dinners to prove that the family had healed emotionally. She met her father only when she felt safe, responded to Chloe when her sister's words no longer carried competition, and allowed her mother back into her life little by little. After the ceremony, Sarah and Julian walked along the Charles River. The cold wind moved across the water. Julian held her hand, his fingers lightly touching her wedding ring. Sarah looked at the illuminated windows across the river and understood that the sweetest revenge had never been watching someone else lose everything. It was reaching the point where she no longer needed them to fail in order to believe she was worthy. She had built a career of her own. She had a marriage she no longer needed to hide. And she had a life that was no longer built on endurance. The cracks in her family were still there, but Sarah no longer lived inside them. If you have ever been underestimated, humiliated, or pressured to stay silent just to keep the peace, remember Sarah's story. Protecting your boundaries does not make you selfish, and choosing yourself does not make you cruel. Sometimes the strongest response is not revenge, but building a life where those who hurt you no longer control your worth. Do you think Sarah handled her family the right way, or should she have given them another chance? Share your opinion in the comments. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more powerful family drama stories.